The Battle of Olustee is interesting because if this battle had taken place in the Western or Eastern theaters, it was only a skirmish, something that perhaps merited a paragraph or two in a Civil War history book. But with 5,500 men on each side, it was by far the largest battle that took place in the state of Florida.
As 1863 came to a close, the Confederacy was still strong, although the Union now controlled the Mississippi River. President Abraham Lincoln was up for re-election in 1864. Under Lincoln's declaration of amnesty and Reconstruction, a state could be brought back into the Union if 10% of its voters were willing to pledge allegiance to the United States. Although no one knew how many Floridians were sympathetic to the Union, many leaders believed a Union Army incursion into North Florida might turn up 10% of the population willing to sign the oath. Meanwhile, Florida beef cattle and other goods were being shipped north to fuel the Confederate war effort.
It was thought by senior officers that it might be possible to isolate Florida from Georgia, hence cutting the flow of cattle and other foodstuffs that were sustaining the rebel garrison. There were also thoughts that Florida could be reconstructed under Abraham Lincoln's 10% plan in time to help Mr. Lincoln be reelected in the fall of 1864.
Headquartered in Union-held Jacksonville, troops led by General Truman Seymour began conducting raids into the interior of North Florida. They captured Gainesville on February 14th, but withdrew soon afterward. Then on February 20th, 1864, Seymour ordered 5,500 troops to march westward along the rail line toward Lake City,
with the general objective of the Swanee River, or some said possibly Tallahassee.
These were soldiers from Connecticut, New York, Massachusetts, and New Hampshire, including 3 regiments of U.S. colored troops. In early afternoon, the Union Army approached an area known as Ocean Pond, east of Olustee Station. An equal number of Confederate troops, under the command of Brigadier General Joseph Finnegan, advanced to meet them, and the battle began in a forest of tall pine trees. With no clear idea of the enemy's numbers or experience, Seymour sent his troops in piecemeal. At one point, a confusion in orders caused one Union regiment to retreat rather than advance.
They were both in open pine forest. Many of the men probably hid behind trees, but to move forward, they had to stay in their formations. And it was because of the fact that there were so many trees there that many of the units lost their formation and as a result lost command.
At the height of the battle, around 3 p.m., Confederate forces stretched over nearly a mile in length, comprising many seasoned Georgia veterans commanded by Brigadier General Andrew Colquitt. As battle lines solidified, the killing began in earnest. Both sides equipped with rifles that could kill with accuracy at over 200 yards.
During the midpoint of the battle, that's when they just stood and slugged it out. They just cut each other down.
Men fell by the hundreds as the afternoon wore on, Northern casualties outnumbering Southern by 2 to 1.
It was not a great day for Union military leadership. The soldiers fought very hard, but their leaders did not use the tools at hand.
At one time during the battle, the Confederate troops actually ran out of ammunition. Instead of retreating, which would have resulted in a defeat of their army, they actually stood there and took casualties while men raced to the rear for more ammunition.
By the end of the day, Union forces are in danger of being outflanked, so they begin a long and, for them, painful retreat all the way back to Jacksonville. 2 regiments of African American soldiers fought a very successful rearguard effort to keep Confederates off the main body of General Seymour's men until they reached the safety of Union lines at Jacksonville.
But back on the battlefield, wounded white soldiers were being taken prisoner, while black soldiers were killed on the spot.
There's quite a bit of evidence that scholars have unearthed over the years that those African American soldiers who fell into Confederate hands after the Battle of Olustee suffered what today would be considered atrocities. Some killed, others re-enslaved. The white officers who led them were especially despised by Confederates because they were seen as inciting former slaves to revolt against their former masters.
The Union lost nearly 2,000 men, the South half that number, in one of the bloodiest battles anyone could remember.
For many of the troops involved, the battle was so horrendous that they remembered it as the fiercest fight they were ever involved in. The Union took 40% casualties in proportion to the number of troops that were involved here. It ranks as the second bloodiest battle of the war for the Union.
One Southern newspaper called it the Great Battle of East Florida. A few Northern papers criticized Seymour and the other leaders. Few gave the battle more than a paragraph.
Olustee was a Confederate victory. There would never be a major attempt by Union forces to isolate Florida again.
For the rest of the war, Florida's interior remained in Confederate hands. On April 9, 1865, General Robert E. Lee surrendered in Richmond, Virginia. The United States flag was raised over the state capitol in Tallahassee on May 20th. In 1912, while many Civil War veterans were still alive, the Olustee Battlefield was dedicated as Florida's first historic site.
My brave boy sleeps in his faded coat of blue. In a lowly grave unknown lies a heart that beats so true. He sank faint and hungry among the famished brave, and they laid him sad and lonely within a nameless grave. No more the bugle calls the weary one. Rest, noble spirit, in your grave unknown, for we'll find you and know you among the good and true, where a robe of white is given for a faded coat.